from such things. And governor, among other accolades and accomplishments. Yes.
Jason, congratulations. Yes, indeed. You were probably the last person that showed up for that meeting when they put your name in, and that's how you got it. I remember when I was in the Army, the person that wasn't in formation, they always seem to get the details.
Yes.
How's everybody doing?
Fine, thank
Good.
you.
It's great to be in person. I think I was up here a few weeks ago when you had the reopening of the office. That's when you had Dr. Nixon was chair or president. But let me start by thanking the members of the Democratic Central Committee for what you do. I've had the opportunity to travel around the state and governor, and running for governor, working with all the different central committees, and you truly are the backbone of the party. You are the organization, the instrument that helps Democratic candidates in so many important ways, whether it's voter registration, certainly during the general elections when we all come together with our nominees to get out the vote effort, and helping also, nurture potential elect candidates for elected office. So I want to thank you for what you do and for giving me an opportunity to come by this evening to present myself. I'm Anthony Brown. I'm running for attorney general, and yes, 4 weeks from today is the election. We think by July 19th, it could be as many as 70% of the voters will have already voted. That's a good thing. The number of mail-in ballots that we're seeing is through the roof. People are relying on early voting, and I think we're fortunate to be in a state like Maryland, where we've got a lot of days, a lot of hours, a lot of early precinct locations. My colleagues in Congress, in some states that are not so fortunate, and even a few that don't even have those. But I'm running for attorney general. Most of you who do know me, and I don't assume everybody knows me, know me perhaps more from my work in public office, whether in the House of Delegates, as lieutenant governor, and now 6 years in Congress. But I've been an attorney for nearly 3 decades. I've practiced with large firms and small firms. I've represented clients in trial courts and appellate courts. I have represented clients in multi-party litigation, complex litigation, class action litigation ranging from employment law to intellectual property to big pharma. I've been involved in big tobacco litigation, and have participated in large settlements. And why do I emphasize that? Well, number one, because a lot of you don't necessarily recall that of me because you know me in those other areas, but because that's the kind of work that is done in the office of the attorney general. It's consider this office of attorney general 700 people, 450 attorneys, 250 support personnel, as the largest law firm in the state of Maryland, the largest public interest law firm with a varied practice group. We represent the state of Maryland, but we really work for the people. And that representation for the state, it's everything from contracts and procurement to every regulation that is promulgated. We review it. We've got oversight with compliance with the Minority Business Enterprise Program. Certainly when the state or any of its agencies are in court, federal or state, then they're represented by the Attorney General. It's a vast, sprawling enterprise. And the Attorney General, him or herself, the Attorney General is a manager, a leader, an executive, and I've had 8 years in executive experience leading state government as lieutenant governor, and really, almost 14, 15 years now as an advocate, a legislator, and solving big problems, not by myself, but bringing people together around the table to solve big problems, whether it was reforming our procurement system or tort laws in Maryland, the work that we've done for veterans, the leadership opportunity that I had around base realignment and closure. So I'm running for attorney general because as through all that work and experience, I know that Maryland's deserving attorney general is going to be an advocate for change. Someone who knows how to reform and improve and not just accept the status quo and implement the law as it is. This is a great state because of the work that Democrats have done. We enjoy supermajorities in the legislature and certainly Democratic majorities in most of our big counties doing great things. But I think we could all agree there are barriers that exist for too many Marylanders. And often these barriers are raised as a byproduct of systemic racism. We see that in education, we see it in the environment, we see it in healthcare and in housing, in the workplace. We see it in policing and the criminal justice system. So I'm running for Attorney General to dismantle those barriers and to advocate for the kinds of changes that will protect every person and empower every community. As I said earlier, while the Attorney General represents the state, you work for the people. And in that capacity, I'll investigate issues and problems. I'll advocate for the necessary changes, and I'll set enforcement priorities that are consistent with the people. So whether we're taking on the rise in crime, which is not limited to Baltimore City, we're seeing rises throughout the state, or improving public safety, whether we're addressing climate change, and the Attorney General has an important role in the area of the environment and environmental justice, or whether we're defending against attacks on women's reproductive freedoms. While we have some strong legal frameworks in place in Maryland, as a nation, for those of us who are old enough, 50 years ago, we thought that those safeguards were in place when the Supreme Court passed Roe versus Wade. So we've got to be very vigilant in Maryland as we defend women's reproductive rights. Whether we are protecting consumers or veterans or seniors, voting rights or workers' rights or the rights of the LGBTQIA+ community. I'm going to be fighting for the people and fighting for justice. Every decision I make and position I take is going to be done through a lens of equity, fairness, and inclusion. So again, thanks for giving me an opportunity to come by and present a little bit about my background and my vision for the office. And I guess I have an opportunity to answer some questions or give some comments. Excellent. Thanks for that.
All right, so Linda, you have a question?
Yes, it is. Actually, if you get elected, you'll be one of the people over me, because I have an appointed position through the governor's office. It's 6-year-long position, and it's appointment. So I still have at least 4.5 years left to it. And it's on the Consumer Council. And the reason that I slow down in saying it is because in every other surrounding state, that body, that appointed body, is known as the Consumer Protection Commission. And for some reason in the state of Maryland, that clout, those teeth that would make it a stronger body was taken away from it years ago. And this is at a time when it is the Consumer Protection Commission that you may have heard on television recently needs to get involved in 2 potentially really strong areas. One of them is in rent stabilization or rent control. Because right now, Maryland has the highest rent rates in just about in the whole country. And no one is trying to do anything about bringing containment to protect the consumers. And in all other states, when that is being addressed, it's being addressed by the Consumer Protection Commission. Second area is, as we all heard, there may have been a bit of fraud committed with some funds handled at the end of our former president's presidency to the tune of $250 million. And they're saying that the entity within each state that may have been impacted, and the likelihood that some of that money got spent in Maryland is really high. That investigation has to be handled by the AG's office in those states. And specifically, it is a consumer protection violation. So I leave it to you to answer. Do you think that there needs to be more emphasis placed on consumer protection and the role in general that the Attorney General's office can play in both of those critical areas?
Yeah, the answer is yes. This year, the Maryland's Consumer Protection Division, as you probably know, is celebrating its 50th year. It's one of the first divisions established in Attorney General's office around the state. So it sounds like, just from the premise of your question, needs a little bit of updating.
Yes.
Without a doubt. It's, as a member of Congress, I have a lot of experience with the Consumer Protection Division, because you can imagine how many requests for constituent services we get that actually go to the Consumer Protection Division, whether it's renters who are trying to stave off evictions, whether it's seniors, and we have a very strong elder abuse law in Maryland, seniors who often are the victims of those who prey and scam on them. I have a 95-year-old mother, and I see it in her mailbox, both her email box, her postal box, the phone calls she gets, the robocalls. And the Consumer Protection Division is essentially designed to protect Marylanders' money. It's really what it comes down to. Sometimes you protect it by protecting their identity, right? As Attorney General, my focus will be on ensuring that we're working with Marylanders to protect their hard-earned money and the money that you've saved for retirement. So whether we are aggressively using the authority we have to go after fraudulent and deceptive business practices. I know Brian Frost recently settled a pretty large case against an automobile dealer who was baking additional fees on top of the MSRP, which already had those fees baked in, or whether it was a settlement which was a multi-state settlement where Brian Frost joined with attorneys generals around the country against a lender, a predatory lender in the student loan context, and students and their families taking out loans at unfavorable terms due to the deceptive practices of the lender. So it's an important office. This commission certainly want to work with the commission and see how we can strengthen the commission. One of the things that I don't think most voters understand or appreciate about the Office of the Attorney General, because it's not something that, unless you're, working in or the office or you're seeking assistance from the office and you're not getting it. If you were to stack up the 50 attorneys general's offices in the state, from which office has the most authority in the broadest areas and which has the least, Maryland is in about the bottom 10. And everything the attorney general does has to be either found in the Constitution or in the laws of this state. There are some attorney general's offices that have just what is inherent common law powers. They don't have to go to the governor or the legislature. So we should work together to make sure we go to the legislature in the 50th year now of the Consumer Protection Division to upgrade, revamp, and make sure it's got the authority to go beyond the things that I mentioned in terms of the consumer protections that are now currently available to the Attorney General on behalf of the citizens.
Thank you.
All right, does anybody else have any questions? All right, how about on Zoom? Do we have any questions?
I'm not seeing any hands up. And I'm not seeing any in the chat.
You guys aren't gonna let them off that easy, are you? I see Eric Washington has. his
I don't
hand
let
up.
him off
Thank
easy.
you.
Mr. Congressman, you mentioned systemic racism. How do you plan to deal with it?
And it depends on where you see it, but for starters, and I go back to what I said about that independent authority. Today, the Office of the Attorney General does not have independent authority to enforce civil rights laws of either the state or the federal government. If you're a Marylander and you believe that you are experiencing, suffering, facing discrimination, whether in housing or the workplace or in accommodations, you either can bring your own lawsuit, which can be quite an obstacle for people who don't have the resource to do that, or you can go to the Maryland Civil Rights Commission. The Office of the Attorney General advises the Maryland Civil Rights Commission. What I'm going to seek is independent authority. So that the office can bring those actions, and whether we're talking about voting rights, with it, currently the Attorney General's office does have the opportunity to bring voter suppression cases. But when I think about discrimination in housing or discrimination against the LGBTQIA+ community, when I think about the kinds of cases we're going to see against women who come to Maryland seeking abortion services, we're going to need a stronger civil rights division, I think, to protect the rights of Marylanders. So first off, I've got to go to the General Assembly and get greater authority to do that. When it comes to things like hate crimes, for example, in Maryland, there are hate crimes that are on the books. I know 3 years ago, Lieutenant Richard Collin, you may remember the case, sadly, tragically killed on College Park campus. He had just graduated he was just about to graduate from Bowie. He just received a commission in the United States Army. And he was killed. A hate crime was brought along with that murder. The hate crimes offense did not stick because the law was not clear enough according to the courts. So the General Assembly has strengthened our hate law crime. Most of those cases are brought when as a companion case when state's attorneys bring whatever that underlying offense might be, whether it's violent crime, burglary, theft, what have you. I'm gonna seek authority for the Attorney General to bring separate charges, hate crimes. We are seeing, and part of that is educating law enforcement on what hate crimes really are. What is the difference between racially motivated actions and just racial bias? And there is a nuanced difference, and often law enforcement will look at something and say, well, they just disagree. Or they just, so when they write up that initial report, it doesn't read like a hate crime. So when you want to bring the hate crime charge or offense, and often you go back to that original charging document based on that police report, it wasn't accurately completed in enough sufficient detail to bring a hate crime. So there's a lot of things we need to do to be able to go after those who are acting out on racial division, and that triggers the violence that we've been seeing in this country. So I've been kind of all over the place, but there are a lot of things that the office needs to do.
I had another question, and sticking with that topic, but I'm gonna let someone else.
Dr. Francis, would you like to
Yeah.
ask your question?
Yeah, so I have a question in regards to ombudsman offices. So when Brian Frosh, Maryland Alliance for Justice Reform had sponsored a bill to have an ombudsman office be responsible for Department of Corrections because of all the challenges that went on due to COVID-19. Is that something that you would support? There was a bill, it was sponsored by Shelley Hedelman, but it didn't really make its way out for a vote. So there was a plan to bring that back to strengthen it for whatever the disagreement was. But part of the problem was they wanted it to be an independent entity, but there needed to be some type of oversight. And they didn't want it to rest with the Department of Corrections. So they were looking at putting it in the AG's office, but there was a budgetary concern there. So would you support having that kind of oversight under your office?
Yes, and let me explain. So not only was there that bill, there was another bill that was introduced that also didn't make it out of committee. I don't even think it came up for a vote, that would have created a separate statewide office of the Inspector General, elected by the people. To in many ways do what an ombudsman would do, but to basically do it throughout the state and with a focus on all of state government. Those two bills, to me, confirm what I hear from a lot of people, which is, where is that oversight and insight into state government where we can identify the issues, the challenges, the problems? Sometimes there are abuses and et cetera, waste, fraud, mistreatment of people. And there's a real frustration among people, residents and voters and our neighbors, that there's no one really watching when these things happen. And it's not just in the Department of Public Safety and Correction. My answer to that is, let's put it in the Attorney General's office. Let's create an activity, an agency, an office, a division, whatever it may be the case, in the Office of the Attorney General, because we're already throughout state government. Assistant Attorney Generals find themselves in almost every department of state government. I just came from the celebration of life for Steve Sachs. And I knew Steve Sachs because I practiced law with him when I was a young associate. And as you know, and before that, he was Attorney General. Before that, he was U.S. Attorney for the District of Maryland, and just a renowned attorney. And he used to always say that the Assistant Attorney Generals have to practice preventative law. And what he meant by that is, don't just sort of understand that you represent the Department of Public Safety and Corrections and you're ready to defend them in court. Work with them to establish the conditions, the practices, the protocols, so that we can avoid the kind of interactions and activities that result in litigation. And I think when you take that and you extrapolate that throughout government, you should think of the Office of the Attorney General as that, not only the watchdog, but the advocate. This is why I start off by saying we represent the state, but we work for the people. The advocate for the people in agencies throughout government to make sure that we are doing right by the law. The rule of law is our client. We work for the people and we represent the state. So I definitely would support that in some form or configuration, but to achieve the goal of having that watchdog throughout government.
All right, and there's nobody else on Zoom. So Linda, you ask a question and then I will let the congressman get on his way. And so there is another question. Who had that? Scott did. Okay. So Scott, you go first.
switching gears, the January 6th committee has certainly exposed lots of issues. I think a lot of us suspect that perhaps this year, but certainly 2024 could have, as we just saw in New Mexico, I think one of the county conditions refused to certify until things were happening. Will there be any role? I mean, I'm not concerned about the vote counting in Maryland. That will be done honestly and accurately. But if there are issues in other states, if something like what Trump had tried in 2020 occurs elsewhere, will there be any role that, as a state or as you as an attorney general, can play to sort of call out if there's wrongdoing in somebody else, or are your hands tied because you're just the Maryland attorney general?
Just for starters, let me say that we do need, Congress needs to really look at the certification process and clarify the law. That is certainly fundamental. I really do hope that that is something that we could find bipartisan support around. But to answer your question, attorneys general around the country work together. And of all statewide officers and offices, and I've been lieutenant governor, I've watched governors and comptrollers as well. You probably see more collaboration among attorneys general. Sometimes it's bipartisan. Think about the opioid settlements, right, that Maryland is participating in. Most every county is participating in that in Maryland. I think 30 years ago, tobacco litigation. And there are just many, many examples of attorneys general, Republicans, Democrats working together. And then there are going to be times when just Democrats or Republican attorneys generals will come together. You can imagine around the anti-choice legislation that's passed in Texas and Oklahoma and Mississippi. They're going to team up certainly when they sue Maryland, because they're going to sue Maryland because they're going to be women that come to Maryland for abortion services. And we're going to get a knock on the door saying we want evidence turned over to prove that she got an abortion in Maryland. And I'm going to say no. And then they're going to sue Maryland, and all the Republican attorneys general are going to team up and file their amicus briefs, et cetera. And we're going to do the same, not on that issue, but we're going to team up to make sure that we're fighting against those efforts. So to your example about election certification or election process in other states, certainly the attorney general in Maryland could not proactively reach into another state. But to the extent that we can join forces, particularly when those cases are brought in federal court, it is very common as the case works its way up into the appellate system for other attorneys general to file amicus briefs. And we all sort of take different angles on the issue, present different arguments for or against our case. So the short answer is yes, we will, but those will always be led by the state, the attorney general within the state that you have that irregularity.
Thank you, Scott. And Linda, finally,
Yes.
to you.
As you're probably aware, Baltimore County has the honor of having been the very first county in the United States to have a Human Relations Commission back in 1963 with the desegregation of Winter Park. And it started with a group of little children that wanted to use the park. And I was one of them that summer. And as a result of being turned away and beaten and spat on and hosed down, we eventually managed to get the park started because the Human Relations Commission came into existence here in Baltimore County. The problem is that all these years later, there's inequity in how the Human Relations Commissions are set up around the state of Maryland. For example, if you're a business, you can file a human relations case if you're a business or against a business that has 12 or more employees. Baltimore County and one other county are the only places in the state of Maryland where you still have the right to file against a smaller business to protect your interests, protect your rights from discrimination. What can be done after all these years to bring more equity, more parity across the state of Maryland in terms of rights? Because people frequently come to Baltimore County saying, can't you help me? Because I was working with an employer that had fewer than 12 employees.
So the Attorney General does offer advice and opinion. on county level matters, questions that are raised by counties when it's an issue that has or potentially could have statewide implication. So if this question or issue that you raise falls in that category, for starters, the Attorney General could offer an opinion, a legal opinion about, perhaps the efficacy of this particular practice in Baltimore County, the legal framework in which it's done, and how it could be incorporated in other counties. But the Attorney General certainly is not in a position, does not have the authority to impose on any county how they establish their Human Rights Commission. Now, if it's an issue based on, after the Attorney General looks at it, maybe offers an opinion that, wow, you know what, maybe what we need to do is to go to the General Assembly and see if we can get a statewide law that sets parameters, minimum and maximum, requirements. But you always want to be careful, and because what's good for one county may not be suitable for another county, and whether or not this falls in that category that we have to look at. It seems like the answer would probably lie in state legislation in Annapolis to try to bring some uniformity, but that would be a matter of whether the legislature has an appetite for that. As the Attorney General, though, I would provide the legal opinion that could support that.
Well, I wanted to thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Attorney, I was very interested in hearing what you had to say. Thank you very much.
Or whatever platform you're using.
Yes.
Okay, great.
26 people.
All right, where do you want it? Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Okay, good.
Once again, thank you very much for coming.
Yep, thank you. Take care, everybody. Whoop, whoop.
Take care.
Yep, take care.
It's okay. It's all right.
No, let me get that.
No. I didn't interrupt you, I'm
Boards
sorry.
out there.
It's okay. There you
The good news is that wasn't on camera. Thank you again.
Okay, take care.
All right, next up, we have another guest speaker here. We have Christine Brooks Crawford, the Maryland Democrats Regional Coordinator, who we will be working
go.
with
Yes.
for the next several months. Welcome. Nice to see you again.
Talking to a few of you, I think, last week, Friday and today, you probably got a call from me for Baltimore Pride parade that's gonna take place this Saturday, June 25th, 1 to 3. Of course, we're gonna organize and arrive at 11:30, and then we're gonna walk down to Charles Street at 1 o'clock to participate in that with Senator Mary Washington. So, so pretty much, yes, I'm your regional coordinator for Baltimore City, for Baltimore County, and for Howard County. And what can I do? I can do voter outreach. I can do community events. I can do phone banking. What I cannot do right now is I cannot support any Democratic candidate. I am for all Democrats, representatives from the Democratic Party, until after the primary. Once we have the primary and we have who we have, then it's all in. I'm behind whoever we have to get in place because, right now with our local Democratic race, we definitely want to get as many Democrats in, if not all. Where we don't have a Democrat, we want to turn. And then once we have that primary, of course, we're going straight to the governor's mansion so that we can get a Democrat in place. So, I already went out, I've done meetings already. I've only been with you guys a week. But I've done several meetings. I've done probably 3 meetings already. I get out to vote campaign already. Done some community events in Bolton Hill this past weekend. And everyone's now saying, who are you? So I'm here to say who I am, where I come from. So of course, the number one question is, are you from Baltimore City? Well, my family is West Cool Spring. I was born and I call it Baltimore General, but it's very general. My family's from West Cool Spring. So Ridgewood and Ricestown, and then my dad, of course, as you get wealth and you move out or you go up, my dad moved us out to Baltimore County. So I actually went to Owens Mills Elementary School. I went to Pikesville Middle School and I graduated from Randallstown High School. So from there, I left, went on to college at Delaware State University. I got my bachelor's in sociology. Then I went to the University of Delaware, got my master's in public administration.
Go Blue Hens.
So yes, then moved to DC, of course, because when you get your MPA, where do you go? You go to DC. So I was in DC for 22 years. I've organized a lot of things in DC. I got executive orders passed when I worked for Mayor Anthony Williams to create Office for Victim Services for him, where that office still exists to this day. I saved about $50 million from leaving DC. That was federal money, and had it reprogrammed to create local victim assistance funds. So anytime victim compensation dollars are not used, then it will go into the local fund for victim assistance. I created that, oh gosh, that was so long ago, probably 20 years ago, yeah, because I won't say, but about 20 years ago, I will say, and it still exists. So from there, I also was a serial entrepreneur. And so when people look at my resume, they're like, okay, I'm president of the DC Fashion Foundation. I've done a lot of work around that, but it's very interesting the work that I did around fashion, because people think it's all about New York Fashion Week or fashion shows and modeling and designers. But no, what I decided to do was take my education, my work experience, in my work experience, my education, and my passion for fashion, because I started modeling at 14. And so when I went to DC, with pretty much, and I got legislation passed to create the first commission on fashion arts and events for DC, and it now falls under the Deputy Mayor for Economic Development. I said fashion is an asset of economic development where you can create jobs, vocational training for young people in school. I ended up starting fashion camps with DCPS, DPR, so forth. Trained over 1,000 kids in DC with regards to that, from that legislation. Then I went on Capitol Hill and got Diane Watson, who was a 33rd district. I used to produce the Congressional Black Caucus fashion shows. Carolyn Maloney and Nyla Dr. formed a fashion caucus on Capitol Hill. So people say fashion and politics, economic development. Well, hey, I did it. So you know, a lot of people are like, oh, your resume is very creative, starting incubators, small business training, TA. But the thing is, I always look at it from a workforce development, education, and economic development standpoint. So that's kind of who I am. You know, like I told the people in Baltimore City that I was working with this weekend, I ran these streets, I know these streets, and I'm ready to work for you guys in these streets. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Hold on.
All right, let's unplug this.
I'm gonna go this way.
Good idea. You joining us?
Yeah. I need now, but.
All right, thank you very
Thanks
much.
so much.
Next meeting.
Okay. Oh, and the other thing I do want to say, because I know I called a few left voice messages for a lot of people for this Saturday. So if you're interested, please email me. It's C Brooks Cropper, so that's CBROOKS CROPPER.
Do me a favor, put on that.
Put it,
board.
okay, at mddems.org. I can text you something for you to fill out to march with us this weekend, as well as you can go to the mddems.org, go to the event page, look for Baltimore Pride, and you can sign up that way. But call me anytime. I'll put my information up here, my email and my cell number, and call me anytime because I'm a serial entrepreneur. I work around the clock. So
I'll put it in the chat too.
okay.
Well, once again, thank you very much
You're welcome.
for coming, introducing yourself to us. Obviously, there's a lot of work to be done. We're gonna have to hit doors, get people engaged, active, everything under the sun. It's going to be a big 6 months for all of us. So welcome aboard.
Thank you.
And obviously, though we have a lot of work ahead of us, it doesn't all have to just feel like work.
Right.
So
No,
thank you.
it's fun. It's my fun.
All right. So with that in mind, we can now move on to the next item on our agenda. The Unity Dinner Award nominations and votes. The good news for everybody is there were, well, I guess this is good news and not so good news. There were not many people who submitted nomination forms. In fact, there were two, Crystal and me. So therefore, we have a lot less to vote on than we would have otherwise. So that is the good news. So with that in mind, I have paper copies for people in the room. On the one award where we need to actually have, where there's an actual competitive race, but we do need at least one yes vote for all the nominees that are uncontested. So with that in mind, I will read them out. We do not need to get into background sitting here tonight. But nevertheless, obviously their backgrounds will be developed in our Unity Dinner program and also stated in detail at the Unity Dinner. So the first up, Lifetime Achievement Award, there's obviously only ever going to be one nominee for this, especially this year, Senator Dolores Kelly. The Central Committee Advocate of the Year is the woman sitting to my left here, Linda Dorsey Walker. Now, what was designed through extensive discussions between Lisa Crystal and myself several months ago is how we're going to do awards this year for the non-central committee advocates, and we decided to make it regional. And I thought, well, actually Crystal did, and I thought it was a great idea. That's how we decided. So how we broke it up was Southwest, West, North, Central, and East. And to go around the county, in the Southwest, it is Margaret Henn as our award winner. In the West, Makita Scott. In the North, Dr. Leslie Grant, our very own Financial Review Committee member. In the Central, Steve Lafferty, a former delegate here in Towson, and the current Director of Planning. And in the East, Johnny Olszewski Sr., former, obviously, County Councilperson, and of course, father to Johnny O Jr. I assume that's not why he won the award. No, he merited, but still. Nevertheless, congratulations to all of them. But we do need a vote, so I'll just say, as a slate, can we get someone to move the nominations forward? Eric, Washington, go ahead.
I move the nominations forward.
Oh, that's easy enough.
I second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay. I hear no response, unanimously passes. They are now our formal award winners. Thank you very much to Crystal for all your work on this. And thank you very much to all the winners, because you wouldn't be here but for all your work. So the last thing we have to then get to is the choice between the Student Support Network and the League of Women Voters for Baltimore County for the organization and their advocacy. So I will read the criteria. Now, those of you who are on Zoom, there will be a link that's going to be dropped into the chat that will not contain these descriptions. So I apologize in advance. I'm going to have to read these out, and you'll have to try your best to remember them. But here we go. The criteria. This award goes to an organization, whether union or nonprofit, located in Baltimore County or operating in Baltimore County, that has undertaken substantial efforts in advocating or supporting positions and or policies held or promoted by the Democratic Party and or support for Democratic candidates. To evaluate nominees for this award, you may consider any and all efforts on behalf of its membership, its and other employees or workers, candidate or issue advocacy, leadership, community organizing, community support, sponsorship, events, provision of opportunities to others, recruitment and or other evidence that furthers the organization's commitment to Democratic Party values. I will say, reading this, I could tell that I'm the one that wrote this some time ago. All right. The two nominees are the Student Support Network, and I'll start with that description. The Student Support Network was created and persists to improve the lives of Baltimore County school children living in poverty. More than 53% of the students, approximately 59,000 children in BCPS schools, are living in poverty. I'm going to say that again, 53%. The network started more than a decade ago as the Loch Raven Support Network, providing Loch Raven High School students and families warm clothing, school supplies, and holiday gifts. Recognizing the vast need throughout the county, the network expanded well beyond Loch Raven High School. The network now has programs in 15 BCPS schools and has added food, personal hygiene products, and other essential supplies to its rooms of support within these schools. During the 15 months schools shut down due to the pandemic, the Student Support Network filled the void by having regular events at numerous locations throughout the county, providing about $7 million worth of food and supplies to families. The second nominee, the League of Women Voters for Baltimore County, the description is as follows. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, grassroots nonprofit dedicated to empowering everyone to fully participate in our democracy. With active leagues in all 50 states and more than 750 leagues across the country, the League of Women Voters engages in advocacy, education, litigation, and organizing to protect every American's freedom to vote. Founded in 1920, the League was a merger of the National Council of Women Voters and the National American Women's Suffrage Association. Referred to as a, quote, mighty political experiment, unquote, it aimed to help newly enfranchised women exercise their right to vote. They created the infamous Voter's Guide, which helps all voters stay informed about political campaigns and petitions. So Kate, could you drop the link to the form in the chat? It is there, and I will circulate the paper copy to those in the room. I printed.
What if we've already voted?
We don't have your name.
Oh, I guess you don't vote again, because we'll know. Yes,
I said anything. Did you inform the League of Women Voters that they would be considered for this award?
Crystal?
Did you inform the League of Women Voters that they would be considered for this award? No. Sure, they would want to kick that. I mean,
Neither am I.
they're not part of. They are very, very careful not to seem partisan.
I had a similar.
Yeah. So the other one,
Yeah, that is definitely true. What Ann said, the league tries very hard to be nonpartisan.
I hear Julie Schumer, I think, in the background here. Julie, are you-
Yeah, sorry. I'm in the league. I represent the league on the school board nominating commission. And it's very important to the league to never be perceived as partisan. Of course, it's nonpartisan, but the Student Support Network is also nonpartisan. And they try to maintain that distinction so that, they welcome one and all, and just as the league does. So it is a little complicated.
And I think I can't speak for either, though I did speak with Lori Teller Mitchell earlier today for the Student Support Network, and I'm not here speaking for her. What I'm going to suggest is on an organization basis, we are honoring them for their work and what they have done, and that is consistent with our values. This is not a partisan award in the sense of, they are great Democrats. They reflect our values. So I don't know what the League of Women Voters of Baltimore County may say, should they be the winner. I do think it's appropriate to nominate organizations that do the work that we would, support. So in that respect, I certainly understand the hesitation, and we don't know if there will be acceptance of it. But at least I believe both have merit to at least for the nominations. Now, is there anything else to add about League of Women Voters, Baltimore County, or Student Support Network?
So Nina had a question, can associate members vote for the awards?
Historically, I believe the answer had been no. Is that your recollection, Linda? Okay. So with that in mind, we'll take it at 3 minutes, since there's only one.
I have 12 responses. There's 24 people on Zoom, and there's about 12 in here, so.
As we're taking those 3 minutes, can I have the names of any person that may have entered this meeting, either online or in the room, whose name I may not have marked present?
I'm here twice.
I've got you.
Cheryl too, twice.
That's Cheryl. I have one guest that's entered and another guest in the back of the room. What's your name?
Larson manager, yeah.
You can have a seat up here.
Okay.
By all means.
Thank you.
All right, everyone's ready. I'll come around and collect the votes here. And Katie, could you, tabulate the votes from Zoom?
All right, we only have 14 responses online. So, so anyway, we have
Any more?
23.
I've called in, this is Danita,
I
so
can't
I
hear,
can't vote.
I'm sorry.
That's, I think it was,
Yeah, let me see. Can you get a better thing on her? Here she is.
I can text my response to Linda.
Okay, all right.
Nina.
Yeah, she said to you.
George.
Thank you.
Vote for one.
oh,
All
one.
right, so, at the end of the 3 minutes, can we make a motion to close it? Because as I said, I only see,
Yes.
I only see, okay, now we have 18 responses. That's much better. Move to close. 3 minutes. Are we at 3 minutes, Jason?
Oh, I still haven't counted, but yes, we can move to close. I think that's sufficient. There's, since we only have one.
Anita say she texted it to me or emailed it.
Said she texted it.
The ones I collected here in the room, I'm gonna think you calculated the ones in Zoom.
Okay. Jason, can you come look at this, please?
Did you vote, Eric here?
I did, so you did get my vote.
Yes.
Okay, so Jason,
So I can-
he should destroy that paper copy then.
No, the paper copy is fine, because I haven't shared it.
Okay.
All right, great, all right,
So, you know the number?
got it.
Raw number?
The roll, no,
Oh,
oh,
70%.
which we have 70% for.
17.
Mhm, okay, all right.
I'll just do some quick math.
Okay. So online it has that you responded and it gives me a percentage, but it doesn't tell me your vote. Okay,
Okay. All right, so by my math, which is always subject to second guessing, the final tally is 19 in favor of Student Support Network, 6 in favor of League of Women Voters. So the Student Support Network will win. I will contact the people accordingly. All right, now that that piece of business is done, we have another guest, another special guest. We would like to call up Katie Kern O'Malley. It's nice to see you. Nice to meet you. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, everybody, for being patient and hanging out here this evening to talk about the important issues that are coming up in our election. You know, it's a big election year. We're gonna get a new governor, we're gonna get a new comptroller, we're gonna get a new attorney general, and hopefully some new members in the council and the House of Delegates in the legislature. So it's exciting. And, you know, right now, we've seen so much happen in our country that has just been so troubling for so many of us. I'm running for attorney general, and it's different from state's attorney. So you have Scott Schellenberger and Robbie Leonard who are running for state's attorney, and each jurisdiction, as I'm sure you all know, has their own state's attorney. But for the state of Maryland, you have one attorney general, and that attorney general is a lawyer that you're hiring. It's a lawyer that you're hiring. You know, they say the people's lawyer, it's a person who represents each and every one of us in all the state agencies, but also in many other statutory ways like antitrust, consumer protection, criminal justice reform, and public safety. And when you're thinking about hiring a lawyer, you want to have somebody that's actually been in a courtroom. And for the past 30 years, that's what I've done. I have to say, Baltimore County is where I started. I never really thought, because I wanted to get a job in the city, because I grew up in Baltimore City and I've loved it. I've had a job there since I was 12 as a newspaper delivery girl. But I got a job in Baltimore County in the state's attorney's office. And I worked there as a law clerk and went to law school at night. And I got hired as a prosecutor as soon as I passed the bar and had my first daughter. So I kind of grew up in the courthouse here and in the district courts for Baltimore County, learning and trying cases ranging from petty thefts up to homicides, because I stayed in Baltimore County for a decade trying cases. And before I left, I was chief of the white collar crime unit, which I have to say most of the victims in those cases were targeted because they were older adults. And so I saw so many older adults get scammed in these different white collar crime cases and economic fraud cases. And those types of cases and the domestic violence cases that I handled as a prosecutor taught me a lot about how you need to have a voice for the voiceless and really stand up for people. So for the past 20 years, I've been a district court judge in Baltimore City, which was kind of my dream. I always wanted to be in the city where I grew up. And I stayed there for 20 years, working in our courts as a district court judge, mainly working as I kind of call it a social worker, trying to help people put their lives back together when they came in the courthouse, not just as victims, but also as defendants. We've had so many diversionary courts in Baltimore City that worked on issues like mental health, substance abuse, homelessness, human trafficking cases, veterans treatment court, all of these problem-solving courts. And some of my colleagues actually said, well, I'm not a social worker, I'm a judge. But you are a social worker when you go to the courts to try and help people rebuild their lives, try and help victims get restitution, but at the same time, be equitable and balanced. And I had a reputation for the past 20 years of being a fair judge. And I have to tell you, it's something that it was hard. It wasn't always an easy job. And you might say, well, why is that so important for an attorney general? Well, it is because you need an attorney general who's going to be leading 450 plus lawyers that go to court. This isn't just a regular political job for somebody that wants to, be a politician. There's nothing wrong with politicians. I'm married to one, and I was raised by a great politician. But my father, who was the attorney general, was like the three other attorney generals before him, a trial lawyer, where you have to be able to lead the lawyers to go to court to fight for Marylanders, whether it's in criminal justice reform, public safety, consumer protection, which is where we really see a lot of work happening in that office, as well as for our environment. Because right now, our environment, as we all know, is being affected by climate change, and the window is really closing in. Back in 2007, there were some great laws that were enacted during the O'Malley administration. But during the last two administrations, none of those things have really been enacted and have been enforced. So we really, really need to start working with our next governor and attorney general and the whole General Assembly to make sure that we enact climate solutions now, which was just passed in the last General Assembly. It was a bill that was presented by Senator Pinsky, and it's a phenomenal, nationally noted reform for our whole sort of energy system so that we are moving away from fossil fuels. And I want to be the attorney general that helps steward that and helps shepherd that in for the next generation. Because if we don't start working on this now, we're not going to have anything left for our children and our grandchildren. So again, it's starting to narrow. You really need to have an attorney general that has those legal skills. The other area that I'm really passionate about, because I was lucky, I was a victim of gun violence when I was in law school and I survived. I wasn't shot, I was held up at gunpoint. My grandfather was shot at and he survived. He had a heart attack and then subsequently passed away. But there's so many Marylanders that are affected by gun violence, and it's so traumatic. There's so many people across our country. We saw it in Buffalo, and then a few weeks later, we saw it in Texas. Nobody, we're hearing Congress say that they're raising the level to buy automatic rifles from 18 to 21. Why isn't anybody saying we don't need these weapons? We don't need these automatic weapons at all. We need to get them restricted. And I know that a few presidential candidates talked about it. And I know Joe Biden did. I know Beto O'Rourke did. But those weapons are for the military and for the police. They're not for regular citizens to walk around with assault rifles. And so I want to start using strategies with consumer protection to go after the gun manufacturers who are unlawfully advertising for these weapons. We've already done it in the city of Baltimore for the ghost gun manufacturers. So it's an area that I think we have to start working on passionately and get it done, because we can't see this happen anymore. It upsets me to talk about it because we saw Sandy Hook, we saw Columbine, and then the tragedy that we just saw in Buffalo, New York, and then in Texas. It's just too many, and I think we're starting to get numb to it. I know in Baltimore, we've seen so many lives lost from gun violence. Every morning I wake up and I read another horrible story. So we have to we can't lock people up and solve the solution that way. We have to find layers and layers and layers of ways to work collaboratively with our state, local, and federal leaders so that we can keep communities safe and get these horrible weapons off our streets. So these are things I'm committed to, as well as the looming issue of Roe v. Wade being overturned. I have to tell you, as a woman, and I grew up as a girl knowing that I had these protections, but I'm sort of tired of men telling us that they're going to protect us. We don't need men to protect us. We just need to be elected. And that's what we need to do all across the board, all across our country. More women need to be sitting at the table. They need to be parts of the legislature. They need parts of the executive administrations across our country for us to really have a voice. Because when men are talking about reproductive rights, they don't have the same understanding that women have. So it's important, especially in the progressive state that we have here in Maryland, that we elect more women to our legislatures, to our executive branch, and especially into our judiciary. So that's part of my message, and I'm going to get out there for the next 28 days and talk to people about this. I really need your vote. I need your support. If you're interested in my campaign, it's katiefornd.com. And I have tons of lawn signs and a great campaign manager. She looks a little tired, and she's certainly tired of hearing my speech. She can recite it. She does. She'll come by my office and start reciting my speech. So I changed it tonight so that you have to learn a new one. But again, it's an exciting time to be running for office, not because it's exciting, but there's so much at stake. There's just so much at stake, and we need to make sure we never get a Donald Trump back again. And we elect a Democratic governor. So let's go out there and turn our state blue again in 2022.
Art, let's see if we have any questions real quick.
Questions.
All right, I see, George, you got a question?
Yeah, one question. I know there's a lot on your plate.
I'm
but-
here. This is my last stop.
But when you're elected, what will be the first thing that you will address?
I think two things at the same time. So we need criminal justice reform. At the same time, we need public safety. So people talk about defunding the police, and I know from 10 years that I worked with police, most of the men and women in the police department are fabulous and wonderful. But we have all seen over the past decade how we have really lost our way when it comes to policing. And there needs to be transparency and accountability. So with the Attorney General's office right now, the office is charged with investigating any police, any civilian death as a result of police activity. I think we need to make sure that these police accountability boards are set up and that they are neutral and transparent so that we're not having police themselves. At the same time, we're seeing people die every single day in Baltimore City and in Baltimore County. All across our state, we're seeing an increase specifically in my city where I've lived all my life. We need to start saving lives and finding constructive ways to do that collaboratively. We have a system now where I think a lot of politicians like to point fingers at each other, and we need elected officials that sit together and talk with each other, whether it's from the executive branch with parole and probation, with correctional services, reforming our prisons, talking about ways to do upstream investments with our mayor, who I think is really, really working hard to get a handle on the violence that's affecting the city. But, I'm sure everyone's read the stories of pregnant women being murdered, women being murdered in front of their 3 kids. We had a young man shot at the harbor who's only 17 years old. We've had countless deaths of, young men and women, and, their mothers, their fathers, their sisters, their brothers, and the trauma that it's caused throughout our state and throughout our city. I've seen it firsthand. As a judge, I've seen it. I've also seen it as a truancy court volunteer when I would sit with kids to find out why they weren't coming to school. And I hear so many stories of violence that had happened to their families and how they just couldn't get out of bed, the kids. And so we need mental health services. We need so many agencies to really cooperate and work together. And all of the different criminal justice coordinating committees that work across the state need to be on the same page. Baltimore City had a fantastic coordinating committee that Governor Hogan stopped when he became the governor because he said it was a committee for people to have lunch together, but it was not. It was a committee for, again, all the stakeholders, the state's attorney's office, the public defenders, the judiciary, the executive branch, the state's attorney, the actual state's attorney. Everybody, parole and probation, sitting down and working out the issues so that we can all be on the same page to keep people safe. It's not rocket science, but it really does require effort and will. And I think if we get a great new Democratic governor, we can all work together. And even if we don't, we can still solve this by working with state, local, and federal law enforcement to make sure we're doing the right things when it comes to criminal justice, when we're keeping communities safe, but not over policing. So those two things, and that's a challenge, but.
Linda, you have a question?
I'm gonna ask you the same question I asked you here earlier today. I'm part of the AG's office Consumer Council. I have a 6-year appointment. One of the things that happened when our governor came in, you're talking about having agencies that start acting like they're going to lunch and so forth, is they took the teeth away from the Consumer Protection Council and Commission and made it just the Consumer Council. All the other surrounding states still have Consumer Protection Commission. Ours is called Consumer Council. And now is the time when we need to have the kind of clout that comes with having a Consumer Protection Commission. Because, as you know, we have a situation of huge rent, the need for rent stabilization and rent control, because the rents in the state of Maryland are more out of control than almost any other state in the country except California. And in addition to that, we've also learned that the president, former president, may have misused funds to the tune of $250 million that were collected from citizens. And they have stated on television, on numerous shows, that the entity in each state that's impacted, that needs to get involved with fighting for those consumers that have that charged as fraud, is the Consumer Protection Division in each one of the affected states' AG's offices. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think that's 100% correct. And the Office of the Attorney General has had a really great worker in the Consumer Protection Division named Steve Sakamoto-Wengel. He's been there for a long time. He is a very bright consumer advocate, and he is probably the reason why so much gets done in that office. So he certainly will be staying, and we're getting that commission reestablished. I think is right on track. You're 100% correct when it comes to rents. And as a landlord-tenant judge, I sat and heard thousands of these cases. And then during the pandemic with the moratorium, we were able to keep people in their homes, which was the objective, because you certainly can't have people in a pandemic homeless. Homelessness in and of itself, without a pandemic, is a horrific situation for people, because it then makes them subject to being victims of crime. It makes them subject to being, trying to find, food for their families so they might commit crimes. That's why we built the problem-solving court for homelessness. But what we did then when President Biden gave us the monies in the city of Baltimore to get people's rents paid to the landlords, the judiciary set up a streamline so that people could come to court, landlords and tenants, get the money, fill out the paperwork, and get through the red tape. So that's something that we did in getting the business. Now that is going to drive us soon. I know that probably through the end of 2022. After that, really, when it comes to price increases, we really have to start looking at what's happening in housing and making sure that it's fair and equitable for tenants. Also changing the laws so that we have just cause. So if you're a tenant in a property and you're told that you have to leave, that the landlord has to have just cause. They have to say it's because I filed way too many, late rents, or it's because you breached the lease, or there has to be a valid legal reason. You just shouldn't have the right to say you have to leave because I say so. So I think changing the laws in that way, and also raising the summary ejectment prices, which is something that summary ejectment is used to get someone evicted. It's a failure to pay rent, and it's only $15 right now. And I think having that increase will then give the money so that tenants will have lawyers when they're in eviction court, because I don't know if anybody's been to court here before. I've been there for life and I'm familiar with it. And it's not scary for me, but if you are someone who's facing an eviction, or if you are domestic violence, or you don't have a lawyer, you've got some judge up there that is intimidating or not really asking questions, you get nervous and you freeze up. And so I think, especially when we're talking about immigration issues, eviction issues, and domestic violence, the rights council is something I think we need to start stepping up here in Maryland and making sure people have representation. Everybody has representation now in criminal courts, but in eviction court and these other two courts that I mentioned, I think it's really essential.
Well, one of the bills, or several of the bills that the Consumer Protection or Consumer Council put forward and back this year were around condominium and HOA management company regulation. Because these new entities have come in and really depersonalized the whole relationship that consumers have with one another who are living in common housing units. And now, they're evicting people left and right and imposing all kinds of regulations that make it difficult for older people sometimes to stay in the homes they paid for.
So I see, Vanessa, I know you have a question, but Danielle had a question.
Danielle and Dan.
Not tandem question, they both are individual questions.
Exactly.
Okay. So, all right, we'll start with Danielle, go to Danny, and then Vanessa will clean it up in the end. All right, Danielle, you're.
Good evening. Thank you for attending our meeting, Mrs. O'Malley. I just wanted to ask the question. This is what I hear from individuals, residences, constituents on a regular basis when considering, they wish that some of the legislators and the individuals running for office, when considering individuals for committees and boards or just for your research, make sure that you have individuals from the minority communities at your table. For example, the churches, the fraternities, sororities, Black Girls Vote, Black Women for Positive Change. There are a host of organizations. And when we say having a seat at the table, that is because you will hear things from a different perspective. And I remember serving on the Maryland Democratic Platform Committee. And so we always talk about equity and equality and implicit biases, but they mean something. Is a whole different connotation to that when you hear it from someone from the minority community, which we know just doesn't consist of African Americans, but it consists of individuals who are disabled, women, LGBTQ plus community, and Asian Island Pacific, Muslim, Hispanic, it go on and on. Anyone who isn't of European or Caucasian race is considered minority. So with that being said, we need to just see some more people that are representative of what the county and what the state looks like to have some input on some of these decision-making processes. Thank you.
Thank you. So, that's a great question. I think whenever we're talking about any issue in the Attorney General's office, whether we're talking about disparities, when we're talking about labor, or we're talking about education, or if we're talking about job opportunities, any of these issues that the Attorney General can either weigh in on from the bully pulpit and try to get everyone across the board to sit down and talk about it, can all be done through the Civil Rights Unit. So the Civil Rights Unit now in the Attorney General's office was established in 2017, and it is a great office. It fields a lot of complaints from people for a variety of issues where they feel as though their civil rights have been violated, whether physically or economically, whether their pay is less than a coworker's because of race or because of sex or gender. So these are all issues that you're right, 100%. You cannot have just your lawyers there. You have to have people from your community in there talking about the issue. So whether it's an unfair labor dispute, or whether it's a school issue, or whether it's something to deal with anything in life where you feel as though there's an issue of your civil rights being violated, we need to have an open dialogue. And as Attorney General, I have to make sure that we do that. One thing I'd like to ask the General Assembly to do is to give the Attorney General's office enforcement powers when it comes to civil rights violations. Because right now there's a unit that can take the complaints and they can forward those complaints to jurisdictions where they're happening. So allowing them to either be handled at a state level or forwarded to the federal government for civil rights violations. Whereas if we had a Maryland enforcement ability, then we could be investigating pattern and practices in all of these different areas so that it doesn't have to get then a call that goes to someplace else rather than just handling it in the AG's office. I think it's also important to make sure that the Attorney General's office, the lawyers and the support staff all reflect the state that we live in. We have probably one of the most diverse states in the country, which is why we are such a strong state. We have so many different cultures and so many different communities that we need to embrace, and we need to make sure that the AG's office reflects that, especially when it's talking about the website, to make sure that people who are from different communities that speak different languages can access the services with the language that they speak, which is something that I think can be done now in 2022. We're so lucky we have great technology. I think we need to start implementing that in all state government, especially in the Attorney General's office, where there's so many issues where people will call and the AG's office may not be able to handle the problem, but certainly can direct a citizen where they can get the help they need. So making sure we don't have barriers with language and culture is something that I'm really dedicated to do as the next Attorney General.
So 2 more questions, apparently. Danny, you're up next. If you can hear me, I assume you can.
Yes, hi. Hi, welcome to the, can you hear me?
Yes,
Sure.
You're good, Danny.
you're good.
Okay, okay, great. My question is that we have elections going on now for the Baltimore County AG race, Schellenberg and Robbie Leonard. And we were talking about earlier with the state AG to kind of have an opinion about some issues that may be happening on a county level. We do know that a lot of times when there are incidents where the police have maybe have killed someone and they go through trial and the AG have found that there were no charges for the cop, and then they go to a civil case, and then, you know, all of a sudden we find that the decisions that are on the civil suits were approved. And it ties up a lot of money, a lot of county money, millions and millions and millions of dollars like that. And some of the reasons for that, as we all know, is that the police officers aren't liable. They can't be sued, you know, for their actions. So, you know, we take on a lot of responsibility far as, you know, the liability factor. So do you think that we may be seeing one day that these officers that, you know, do these crimes are going to be held liable?
Sure. So the question is, you know, so Attorney General is different from state's attorney. So
Yes.
State's
Yeah.
attorney now, if there is, because of Anton's law being passed in 2021, no state's attorney's office across Maryland can investigate a civilian death. That has to be investigated through the Attorney General's office. That was mandated by law. So and it took effect October of 2021. So we've had about 17, sadly, civilians die as a result of police interaction, whether it was a shooting, a physical confrontation, or a chase in a police car. So there's been approximately 17, and the jurisdictions, just about all of them, other than Hereford County, have been compliant with the law, where they have immediately allowed the state police and the Attorney General's investigators to go to the scene to investigate everything, to get the body worn camera if that's available, because most jurisdictions have body worn camera now, and to do an entire investigation, which sometimes can take a couple of weeks, sometimes it can take a few months. But it is taken away from the jurisdiction where it happened. So you're not having the police themselves, because you can all see how that can be a disaster. The issue with the law, though, is that once the Attorney General makes the decision whether to prosecute or not, then it has to go back to the jurisdiction where the incident occurred. So if the AG says, we find the police officers or officer is guilty of a crime, and it's a homicide and it should be prosecuted, they send it back to the jurisdiction, whether it be Baltimore County, Baltimore City, Hartford County, and then that prosecutor handles the case, or doesn't. There's nothing really in the law that says that prosecutor has to handle the case. which I think is a really bad thing. I think what should happen is AGs get to investigate because it's then transparent, accountable, it's not in the jurisdiction where it happened. And then if there's a determination that the officers acted outside of their scope of their duties and they caused a homicide, then it should be prosecuted with the attorney generals, investigators, and lawyers, and with the assistance of their state's attorneys. But that the AG should make the decision. If they're gonna make a determination that the officers should be prosecuted, it should then be stay with the same investigators, the same lawyers, and then join with either Baltimore County or Baltimore City or Hartford, wherever the incident occurred, sadly. So that is something that I know when Attorney General Frosch got this new unit, he really wanted the legislature to also give the state, the AG's office, the ability to follow through with prosecution or not. And the way the law is now is, and like I said, it's really wobbly. We've had about 17 cases and there hasn't been a determination through these 17 cases yet that the AG has said there should be a prosecution, but it's going to happen eventually. And that's why we really need to tighten that law up because you don't want police policing themselves. That's the other way to make Anton's law more effective, to have transparency and accountability with the police, because we've seen for many years where there wasn't. I mean, I was a judge in the city and I've had 2 police officers lie to me under oath and I reported it immediately. And I knew they lied based on all the testimony. I won't bore you with it, but it was pretty specific. And I made a finding on the record that they had lied. I reported it immediately and nothing happened. Nothing. So you can only imagine if you're a regular citizen and the police officer violates your rights and you complain about it. And not that I'm a special person, but I mean, if you're a judge and you complain about it, you should hear something. I'm not saying I'm special, but, you know, you ought to hear something back. And I heard absolutely nothing. So I believe that we have a lot of work to do in policing. You know, there's no excuse of bad actors. You know, we don't say that for any other tax-paying service. That, again, we have so many good men and women that put that uniform on to protect our communities, but there are individuals where we need quick, swift accountability in order to make sure that any wrongs that they're doing are immediately addressed and they're off the force.
And they need to be held accountable. And,
Exactly.
they should be able to be, they should be able to be sued, as an individual. That's my point.
Yeah, they don't have the Bill of Rights anymore. That got taken away as well in 2021. The police officers' Bill of Rights is also taken away.
Well, thank you, Danny.
I think Danny asked about holding the officers financially responsible where they're paying things. That's would be typically in the civil suit, right?
Correct.
There, and evidently the jurisdiction is actually picking up the
Right.
So to speak.
That's right. And that's what I'm saying.
That's
Yes,
what
if they have acted
different,
outside of
though.
if they've acted outside of the scope of their job, then the jurisdiction can't. But if they've acted within the scope and it's really kind of tricky. But if there is reason to believe that they acted within the scope of their authority and something horrible happened and they are not going to be charged criminally, then the jurisdiction is responsible to pay for it. But if they go up and shoot somebody, kill somebody without just cause, then they'd be responsible criminally.
Let's take the George Floyd situation.
Well, Anna, we have Vanessa has a question. Should we
I'm
remind
sorry.
that? I'm sorry to just cut that off because we also have a time issue here too. And I made a promise that it would be the last question, so I apologize. Otherwise.
Okay, so my question is a little bit of a detour. And I'm not actually sure if this is even falls under your jurisdiction. But I've talked to a lot of people in my community and they're dealing a lot with cable companies. And sometimes there's no competition in an area. The apartment complex may have a connection with that cable company, and then the people who live there have to deal with terrible service just because they have no other option. And it is disgusting, especially now where you actually need internet. We had the kids at home for how long and they weren't able to really do anything because Comcast was not actually trying to do their job. And then the actual apartment complex wasn't doing their job. So it really becomes a problem. And I've heard about this issue all over the country. I lived in New York. It was the same issue up there and it's an issue here. Other communities, they have right across the street, they actually have an option. So there's no reason why there can't be more options. It's just because of the connections that they have, they're not offering it.
Yeah, and with a specific jurisdiction, so the county executive and or the mayor, whoever at the time of the city, they way back when all the infrastructure was laid, that was the company that did it. Because I had the same issue when I moved to Baltimore, back in Baltimore, from Annapolis, and we wanted to be able to use a different company, but we had to use Comcast because they had the contract. So my antitrust expert right here, Catherine Larson, could probably help me investigate this because she's an antitrust lawyer, but I think there is an issue. I think I've been talking all day, so.
No worries.
But no, I have the same issue, so it is something we need to look into from a consumer protection angle and antitrust.
Yeah, definitely consumer protection. We've dealt with, like I said, I've talked to so many people. I've gotten people in my community to just be like, hey, this is a huge problem. And, you know, we do have other antitrust issues going on. This is just something that affects people. It's a necessity now, and it's becoming a problem. So
Because so many people are working from home and are either in a hybrid situation.
Yeah.
So you have to have that connection. And I know we now in the city have Xfinity, but it was all started through Comcast, and it's an issue that we have.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for your questions, and thank you. Yes, another picture.
Oh, thanks.
Yes.
All right, and leave some
Okay, you should
signs
go.
here, please.
Yeah, and
We should switch-
campaign material, because we
You're all
have some
set.
fairs coming up.
Should I return the middle?
We can run that carousel back.
Okay.
too. We have a fair coming up.
Thank you. Do you get out to vote? You
Yes.
know?
Good to see you. Great to see you. Thank you for your questions.
That's quite right. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
All right, we're cruising now. All right. Next item of business. All right, so over the course of time, we had made reference to attendance requirements and everything, and for a while, of course, with COVID and stuff, we had I guess some more lax standard understanding that there were other things going on in people's lives. However, sitting here in the moment, there were a number of people who reached double digits over time, and something more needed to be done. Others, you know, were just barely over the line, but they got caught in the dragnet. But nevertheless, it's not something I take any pleasure in, but we are here to also decide whether or not one of our members, if they are not in compliance with the attendance requirements, whether that person should be removed as a member, or as a committee, we vote for that person to stay as a member. First, before that starts, I will have Linda identify absences, and the particular member is Vanessa Carrington, how many absences are there for Vanessa according to your sheet?
Okay, for Vanessa, there are 9 absences in the past 12 months.
Okay. Now, part of our bylaws allows the member to, of course, be here, and we want her to provide a defense because she would like to stay on the committee. And so Vanessa's here tonight to tell us, to explain the absences and provide other information. So I turn the floor over to Vanessa.
So my absences are due to, first, there were personal reasons that I was not able to. I don't really want to get into them too much. But then there was actually a great reason. I actually had a baby. So the personal reasons happened right before the baby. And then honestly, I was loving her, and that's all there really is to it. And then once I actually came back, I started working again. I came back and I said, hey, you know, I would love to at least finish up my term with you guys. You know, I believe in the Democratic Party. And so I have certain skills, you know, technology, fundraising. I actually work with fundraisers now, and training and strategy mean, that's like my full-time job and I'm learning a lot and I'd like to, you know, continue to help out with everything and see, that's pretty much it. And, you know, love you guys if you have me. If not, I still love you no matter what.
So there will be another form that's gonna be posted in the chat, and I have other paper copies for the people in the room to vote, and you get one too.
So, one for yourself.
Yeah.
I see it. I didn't know that.
And if pictures of the baby will help. I'll put
Yeah, yeah, I see that.
Oh.
We have questions?
Yeah.
Did you mention that where you live, there was issues also with the internet?
Oh, yeah, the internet's ridiculous. Listen, my stepson, he actually was on the internet today, doing SAT prep, and it kept dropping the entire time. It's ridiculous.
Right, so even when you had an
Oh, yeah.
opportunity, you were having issues with the internet.
Thank you very much. Do you want to come up and read?
So I just want to say that on the form that you're getting, there's also Sam Moxley's name, but Sam has decided that he was just going to resign, so you can just ignore that line there. No, on the online. Yeah.
What was the
Now,
cutoff
in all
for?
fairness, we have some other folks that are in the associate category where they really don't have any rights to do what Vanessa is doing because it's considered an honorary
Anybody else?
appointment. And so therefore, if you choose not to participate, then it's a self
Well,
choice.
on the, for the associates, I think there's an issue came up we're gonna have to talk about in the meeting. But it will be dealt with.
I'm only seeing 10 responses from the Zoom participants.
Andrew, what was the cutoff for like the number of absences?
You have to attend at least 6 of the 12 meetings. So for the people that we're really addressing, they're like 9, 10, 11.
But did you have any like 6 or 7?
Yeah, we did have some 6s and 7s.
And why did we decide not to address those people?
Basically, John Hertz resigned and Sam Moxley resigned, knowing that they would be removed for their absenteeism.
Well, they were gonna defend, but then ultimately
Yeah.
decided
Mark.
it was time for them
Easter
since they're not
also
running. And so that's why we're thanking them for their service as well. And they are it's time to move on. And that's the reason why.
Yeah, several people resigned.
Yeah. And then as for the anything with the associate members, that's gonna be dealt with probably the next meeting, probably imagine the next meeting. So have you received any? Shelley here.
Only 11 responses from online.
You have a quorum?
Yeah, quorum.
Mhm.
Mine's not, coming through.
We had a forum before we started the meeting.
Yes, and then mention, and then.
And then other people came in.
Yeah, I want you home.
Well, while we're doing that, no, we have, well, I'll get around to my children, but we need some people to be volunteers for this weekend.
Only 11 still.
That's fine, close it, move to close the
Okay.
voting.
Move to close the voting.
Right.
6 to 5.
And what's the threshold we need for? One way or the other.
Well, I mean, people are declining to vote, so they're
Right.
reclosing themselves.
May I ask,
How many people do we have that
I-
are not voted?
I voted before the meeting. Did my vote go through? Mark Weaver?
Mark Weaver.
There were several people.
Yes, yours came through.
Okay, thanks.
Did mine go through, Katie?
As Danny Blounce came through.
Okay.
How about mine? Margaret Forte.
Who's speaking?
Margaret Forte.
Margaret. Did mine come through? Margaret Forte.
Yes, hers came through.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Ready? Well, out of the 19 that have voted, it's 12-7. How many people do we have in?
In the meeting?
How many members do we have?
Oh, who voted? So I mean, I have 11
No,
responses,
just that.
so they're members.
Right, how many people have abstained?
That would be-
Okay,
that
all
counts the
right,
voting
hold on.
members in this room.
Okay, great. We have 18 participants left on the Zoom, so some people have left us.
And how many people out of the 18 are not? Members?
16. 16.
So out of the 11, or out of the 18, 16 are members. Yes.
Wait,
Subtract-
14, because we have to subtract me and George, so 14 people are members.
Okay, so we're only missing 3 votes out of the end. So 3 people have abstained. Gotcha. So still had a quorum anyway, that ever came up as an issue. The final vote tally is 12 in favor of stay, 7 in favor of remove, and 3 have abstained. Therefore, Vanessa Carrington, you will be staying as a member through the end of your term. Yep. All right, that order of business is now concluded, so we can move on to the last order of business before we get to just subcommittee reports, stuff like that. Nominations for a second vice chair must be a male according to our bylaws. Because our first vice chair, Liz Brown, is now, well, our former second vice chair is now first vice chair. So do we have any nominations for a second vice chair?
Has to be a male.
Has to be male.
Can you
Not
nominate?
my rules.
Can you nominate yourself?
You can nominate yourself.
I nominate.
I'll nominate George.
No,
Eric Washington nominates George. George is seconding it.
second.
All right. You know, if you do get it, we still need you to do all the other stuff too, right?
I'm resigning from this
You're
ad.
gonna do that, too. We're gonna- it's gonna be really interesting.
Because I certainly can't do any of that stuff. I have no earthly idea how to do all of it.
Vanessa can.
I have a nomination.
There you go.
I don't know if you're watching Zoom.
It was good.
That's what she said.
Oh, Liz wants to say something.
All right.
Yeah, I have a nomination. I don't know if you're taking from the floor and then from Zoom
Yes.
when you get to Zoom. Yeah, I'd like to nominate Mark Weaver.
Okay.
I second.
All
Well,
right.
I'm not running for reelection, so I wouldn't be there very long.
Well, this
Well,
is
I mean,
only till
The
December.
term is until the end of November, beginning of December, actually, for this. It's to replace me for that
Oh.
term.
Well, you
But
can-
you're well,
Okay.
you can make it. your
Okay, thank you.
Mark, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So it's between George and Mark. So that means we will, well, are there any other nominations? Going once? Going twice? Nominations will be closed. So it'll be George and Mark, and we'll have to vote on it the next month, right? We don't have to actually vote the paper ballots here, nor are there any Google forms created online. So next month, on July 26th, remember, not the 19th, we'll vote for the second vice chair between George and Mark. I congratulate you both. Thank you for stepping up.
Okay, we have something in the chat. I'm seeing here. Yes, if there's any more business being done, that's something.
Oh, yes, we'll be getting there. All right. So thank you, George. Thank you, Mark. Thank you to the people who nominated Eric and Liz. All right, next, subcommittee reports for the union dinner, just real quick. we are still identifying a keynote speaker. I followed up with Dr. Tolson and with Linda to try to identify our next moves. And hopefully we'll have something in place relatively soon.
Yes, the person, right. Yeah, the person that I'm going to be trying to reach out to is a person who previously, when I put on a series of law enforcement conferences, and said he would be willing to speak at the next one if I put on another one, but then I didn't. And so that's the former head of Homeland Security, Jay Johnson. And he is outstanding. And I've reached out to try to get his current information, contact information. And I did so by reaching out to Yvette to see if she had it. And she's very excited over the possibility of having him. So.
And we're not shutting the door on Cheryl Neifel because I will never shut the door on Cheryl Neifel. But obviously, without a response to date, we have to move on and try to secure keynote speaker. And when Linda's told me about Jay Johnson, there's only one answer to that, and that is of course. So that was that. So that's the Unity Dinner update. Obviously, you know the other update when it came to the awards. So over to Linda on, hold on.
If you can't get Jay, who's who you looking at now? Who's after Jay? Is it just Jay?
We're gonna plan that in a couple weeks.
Oh, okay.
We get to that point.
No, I'm just saying, I thought there was other options.
No, we were trying to,
we're
going through a checklist. We're going through a checklist of people.
Right, we talked about, different issues that are at the forefront. We talked about the person in charge of Planned Parenthood, who's actually crossed his life. We talked about a lot of people, but I mean, please come to a Unity Dinner committee meeting and help us with this because we really do want to, we're going to have more than just one keynote. We'll have one keynote, we'll have other speakers.
We'll have other feature speakers as well. That's what we can fill the blanks there too.
Because you'll have people introducing the speakers, the people who are getting the awards.
Well, so, because in the interest of time, like the way things typically go, especially when now we have more award winners than we ever had in the past, probably it would just be a brief introduction by either myself or someone to the individual award winners. They probably would not be able to then speak other than to say maybe thank you, with maybe one notable exception of another committee. That would be Senator Kell.
So, at the last in-person one, we had their bios on the screen, and we also had them in the program, because I believe in like 2018, perhaps, it went on much too long.
Yes.
The introductions were longer than the speeches. So, yes, Liz Brown was very instrumental in making sure that we had that.
And for some reason, it's now a good idea for me to be introducing people, and I tend to be more long-winded than anybody else. So we'll see how that goes. All right, so leaving that aside, we can move on then to Linda with Bears Festivals, because she's got a lot of important things to say and everybody needs to listen up.
Okay, so, yes, just follow up on the Juneteenth events that we were part of. We have representation for the Democratic Party at several different Juneteenth events. I will say that on Saturday, the windiness of the weather made it difficult in a couple of different locations, like at Randallstown.
Yes.
On Liberty Road, we started off with about 30 or 40 tents, which then started rolling across the parking lot along with the potting soil weights that were holding them down. So we ended up with just mostly tables. Danielle was there. She stayed for, I think, the entire time. I had to be floating from one event to the next. But I will say that it was a good attendance in the end. Lots of people came out when the weather, calmed down and the sun came out. And so I think that was a good use of time. We were able to do some things for both the party and for more. We also covered Turner Station. Gee, I wish more people from that area had been there. Spectacular weather on Sunday. Breeze coming in off the waterfront, tons of people, great food, and a lot of people who are now more engaged in politics than I've ever seen them before. And that's thanks to a lot of time being put in by one of our members in particular.
Shout out.
And that's Rodsita.
Yes.
Rodsita Gray and her mother have brought so much attention to what's happening politically. And for the first time, because I used to go over there and interview folks and all the rest of that, and people would say, well, you know, nothing much is going to change and so forth. Now you've got people excited, talking about getting involved themselves in the race and anxious to find out who's running and who they can support. And that's because of grassroots, ground level people breaking it down to them in a way that they can understand. And I thank you for it. Now,
East Towson.
East Towson.
Yeah, well, I know, throw over to Ann George as well for East Towson when we were there at the Juneteenth Festival on Sunday, along with Tom Glancy and Donna Delano Newark. And it was a great day there too. It was, I mean, what you said of the weather, it was gorgeous. The music was fantastic. I'm always happy to support Nancy Goldring and her efforts with her community on top of it, especially, you know, the historic nature of the community, which, you know, adds to it. But we got a whole bunch of people to sign up for 4-1.
About 32.
Right. There were a lot of candidates there, of course, and everyone made their rounds and everything. Yes.
Right, and then there were tons of candidates. I think someone told me there may have been as many as 20 candidates that showed up at the Juneteenth event at the Banneker Center, which was the official county one. I wasn't there when the candidates were there. Was someone else in this room here when the candidates were there at Banneker? Because they floated from Banneker over to East Towson and also to Randallstown. And a lot of other Juneteenth activities were going on. I know something was going on in Georgia's neighborhood. They had a flea market over there. There was another community event in which 4 communities came together up in the Kings Park area. But a huge D9 event took place at Northwest Park. And that was a lot of fun. Hundreds of people showed up. We got a ton of people signed up. And I think that more and more people are starting to wonder, you know, when we're going to start the caravans, when we're going to start the sign waves and things like that. So I'm anxious to have some of that start. And now moving on to this coming weekend, I'm hoping that some people, well, yes, but let's start with this weekend on June 25th. I'm hoping that people that live in the northeast area and central Baltimore County and northern Baltimore County area will support the Perry Hall White Marsh Town Fair. Now, let me ask, can any people put in time? Because we need people from 9 o'clock until 12:30, that's the first shift, or from 12:30 to 4 o'clock, that's the second shift. Show of hands, anyone? I know that some of the people who were already here said that they were going to be here. And Eric said that he was, Crystal, you gonna be there? You wanna be at our booth? Okay.
I'm early morning.
You'll be there.
So I'm gonna help Eric with the 10.
You're gonna help out with the 10? Eric said he was anxious to be there at 9 a.m. If anyone online is interested in participating, please do, even if you can come for just part of the day. We've got to, that's why I've been collecting the political material from some of the people who came by today, so that we will have sufficient quantity. Because we gave away some material at all these events over the weekend. We still have a lot of some people, but not a lot of other people. So if you have access to some material that you can share, please leave it on that curl back there so that when we show up to pick it up, we'll have it.
And if you know anybody else who's willing to be there to volunteer on our behalf too, you don't just have to be a Central Committee member to volunteer for this. If you just know anybody who's willing to volunteer for the event, please have them contact myself or Linda or whomever else on the Central Committee to at least, you know, let us know that they are willing to appear and help out.
And we can wear Democratic Party t-shirts.
Sure. Right.
Well, but for nonpartisan. things,
Right,
we
you
can.
cannot wear a
There's a
candidate
lot.
t-shirt while sitting with the table or under the tent.
Yeah.
You may be able to adjacent to it, but you cannot fall under the tent or working at the table.
Or something non-partisan.
Or I could wear the Democratic.
You wear your shirt,
Yeah.
the
Oh,
four
this,
more.
this is the shirt right here.
There you go.
There you go.
Yes,
Some
that
people
shirt.
have them.
That's
Yeah.
what I meant. I meant the
Yeah.
ones
Right.
that just-
Right.
And when I
Four-
asked
four-
them-
four more works.
And when I asked them at the party meeting, they didn't have any more. of those. That was from a long time ago.
Yeah.
They didn't have them.
Yeah,
I was gonna get some.
all right, and then we have, just to keep in the interest of time here, as much as I always get diverted myself and off on tangents. And obviously feel guilty, trying to get other people off theirs.
Oh, I forgot.
That's good.
Danielle
Thank you.
has something
Well,
to say.
we'll get to that, we'll get to that. Dundalk Parade.
Yes, Dundalk Parade. Ed Livingston has agreed to let us use his pickup truck that has a flat back trail on the back. And he said that 6 people can be back there and then one other person in the vehicle with him. So 8 people altogether from our party can be participants. And so if you are from the eastern side of the county, we're not going to be doing a ton of parades this year, but that one we definitely want to cover as ourselves, not walking with someone else, but as the Democratic Party.
I'm gonna underline that, because this is the only one where we will be able to act as the Democratic Party, because other parades, such as Towson, wherever else, do not allow the parties to march in their parades, or walk in their parades. So this is the only one, therefore, whatever we can do to help turn out Democrats and volunteers on our behalf, that'd be helpful. And keep in mind, we also want to have a presence in this area. We don't want to just abandon it and abandon people there. We want to get people out there and energized and active. If we don't do that for them, they're not going to show up when we need them too. So we want to be there to give them something to cheer for. We want to be there to help them.
What's the date? And I
July
want,
4th.
I also want to thank, I
Yep.
forgot to mention, I want to thank Alejandra for coming over to Turner Station. At one point, she used to actually be in the Girl Scouts with Rosita's mother.
Oh.
And so she did a live feed from Turner Station in Spanish and English. And I think she said that she might be available for this event as well.
Right.
So.
And the Dundalk, what
because
time is that?
area has
Early?
changed a lot and it's becoming increasingly Latino.
Can I
Yes.
tell you something?
And,
I've been sign waiting,
yes,
okay, for Democratic candidates. And I have gotten some very nasty shouts.
Oh, yeah, you will.
So be prepared.
We almost got run over.
Yeah. That's the Democrats. And one guy had a loudspeaker on his truck
Oh,
and was at the light, and the whole time he was chanting.
all right, well,
So, and
you
it
know
really, the other thing is, it's really great if they all wear the same Democratic shirt. I know you can't do that, but at this point.
one of these
wouldn't that
days,
be-
in the near future, we will figure out a way to have the t-shirts and we will.
I need to address that. We tried to do that and we only had one person pre-order a shirt. So, and that's our central.
Yeah, and I was
So-
looking for them this past week and they didn't bring it.
Let's not get sidetracked here because we
March
get
to the
keep on
break.
time.
Can't you buy them shirts?
Excuse me, you have to have them printed and things like that, and then there's a minimum. If I only get them 20 shirts, it's gonna be $40 a piece, where if I can get 100
I'm not
people,
going, but
it's
I'll buy
that,
a shirt. Maybe some other
you
people.
know, so.
Well, we want to deal with this on another day, just in the
Another
interest of
day,
time, because it's not a
9
contemporary
o'clock.
right now.
Yeah.
And we still have Danielle, who has something to say about her event on tomorrow night. Danielle, you wanna?
Hello, everyone. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to Jason and Linda Dorsey Walker for attending the Baltimore County Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated Juneteenth celebration. I know I've been a part of it for over 20 years, and it was really nice after what we have been dealing with the COVID. We had with COVID, not the COVID. We've had close to 500 attendees, and everyone really enjoyed themselves. And a lot of people got to hear about that for more Baltimore County. Some people are a little apprehensive in the beginning, but when you start explaining to people about how you need and you want more representation, this is what you talk about all the time, and your vote is your power, then they got excited. And even with the Divine Nine, which is all of the African-American sororities and fraternities that was out at Northwest Park, that Linda, and Linda, you have just done a phenomenal, amazing job. I watch you on the Leaks Forum and just what you do and how you break it down along with Dana from the ACLU, and break down the importance of having a voice and having the redistricting in the 4 more Baltimore County, and also the real purpose of why people do what they do. A lot of people are more so self-serving and just want to keep their offices and not really work for the people. And then we also have individuals who think of minority groups as being monolithic and only sticking with one person that they're going to support and vote for. But I like to think if we're all Democrats, let's all act like Democrats. Some of us are Democrats, but some of us don't speak to one another. We don't vote for the Democrats. We only vote for people we want to vote for. And it's just a lot of undercover things going on with the Democratic Party. So we need to get ourselves together as well and get our messaging together. What I wanted to ask Liz, I'm just a little disheartened too, because what we stand for as the, and I'm saying it's a group for party building. We are the grassroots organization of the Democratic Party, and we are supposed to ensure and make sure that all Democrats get elected. And we know that this was supposed to be the midterms that was important, democracy versus autocracy. And so I don't know if we have, because I haven't heard anything from the Central Committee. I know we've been doing this in other organizations, but we have not had, to my knowledge, and if we had, it's bad that I haven't heard about it, any voter registration or voter education. And so I see a lot of people out there doing their own thing. But as far as us making sure that all Democrats, which sets the tone during the midterms, are informed and knowledgeable and voting, and not just voting like the Board of Elections asks us to make sure we have people pick a party, because unaffiliated or independents can't vote in the primary, which sets the tone for who you vote for in November. So I just don't feel like we did our due diligence as a Central Committee on that part as far as voter registration, voter education. We could have been creative like everyone's doing now, and in their personal status being creative. And so I just hope we get to do something with party building prior to that. And like I've mentioned for the last, I want to say at least 7 years, about us partnering with these other organizations, AKA the Divine Nine, like Linda did, Black Women for Positive Change, 100 Coalition of Black Women, Black Girls Vote, all these organizations that come out in droves to vote. So when we get another statistical data, I think Danny Columbus did it the last time, I'm not sure if it was Danny or the other young man, you don't have to go too far to ask why a lot of the quote unquote minorities, which is really the majority, didn't come out to vote, because we are not even going out in their communities. We're not seeking and asking them, and we're not even coming on the quote unquote northwest side of the town. And a lot of people, especially my sorority, we're nonpartisan. So we have Republicans, Independent, Green Party, and Democrats. And again, this is about democracy versus autocracy. So we can all, if we're not coming together as a collective group, how are we supposed to bring the county together? So I just wanted to give my 5 cents, 25 cents to that, and hope that we will do a little better with that. Thank you.
Danielle, don't you have an event tomorrow night?
Yes. Oh, okay. That's another thing. So I'm doing so many things. That's what happens when you're doing a lot. So also Baltimore County Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, along with Black Women for Positive Change and along with Black Girls Vote, we are collaborating and we are having a Meet the Candidate forum. It's going to be via Zoom because we are in code red. We're still dealing with COVID. And so a lot of our constituents and individuals in the community, not even just in our districts, they want to know, are we going to do anything via Zoom? So people who want to come out and don't want to have to wear a mask, every time they come out and because of COVID want to participate. I did put the link in. So if anyone is interested, or if there is someone who their name is going to be on the ballot in Baltimore County, please have them go on and sign up so that they can participate, because the people actually want to hear from them. But in addition to that, they want them to hear from them what their issues and concerns are and what they can do for the community. So thank you for reminding me. I put that down to say that, Jason, but I did put it in the chat. So please go ahead, sign on and, share it, because we need attendees just as much as we need the elected officials. And you can be Republican, Democrat, Rose Party, Green Party, whatever party. It's a nonpartisan party. So thank you.
On your point before, I will say something that hopefully will leave a smile on your face. When I was door knocking in Randallstown on Saturday, I met a whole bunch of young voters or first-time voters, and went there with them to show them where their, told them where their early voting sites were, the nearest ones, told them how to go about doing that stuff, to get them out so they would be aware of where they need to go, when they need to go, and all the other stuff that we just discussed. So, I mean, I know only me doing that door to door, but nevertheless, I will say the people I met, the first time voters, were very energized. They were very happy to hear from somebody. And, I left with a very positive impression that these people are going to be regular voters.
And thank you, Jason. That's definitely what we need. That's what we also have at our tables when we do our different forums is we have a whole packet that we get from the Board of Elections, which labels and gives them all the addresses of all the early voting centers, the dates. We even have something that talks about the reason why we vote. And it goes back from a historical perspective of the real purposes and reasons of why you should come out there to vote. A lot of people don't even know how some of these issues affect them directly or indirectly. And we also ask them, don't just stop, go to the bottom to the questions, because those are what happens in your local areas, and they have to do with a lot of things that affect them directly. So thank you. That is definitely part of voter education.
Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you.
Anything further? Otherwise, we'll move to adjourn.
No, just that now 16-year-olds can become voter judges.
Election
judges. 16-year-olds. Used to be you had to be 17 and turn 18 by general election. They're so desperate, they're going to pay 16-year-olds $189
That's
a
a good
day.
point. So
A lot of that has to do with the climate. People are scared to come out.
Hold on, everyone. That is an important point. We need to recruit election judges.
Oh, I've been recruiting them.
Yeah, right. But everybody needs to know that we need to do what we can to recruit election judges. This is a very important role that people don't, think about until the last second. So please, if you know somebody who's not partisan or doesn't want to be involved with, campaigning, those kind of things, but wants to be involved in something that's meaningful, that'll be helpful. That is exactly where to turn their energy. If if they don't want to join with us to do things, make them, give them the information to become an election judge. Having done the voter protection stuff in 2020 and being all around, you tend to miss sometimes. Sometimes people don't show up. We need as many people there as possible who are good quality candidates. It doesn't matter necessarily what their political persuasion is, as long as they're quality candidates to be election judges, but they need them desperately.
It's
So
also
please
the
recruit.
15-hour shift.
No, if you don't want to stay the whole day, there's a new category where you only work for 3 hours at the end of the day from 6 to 9. You get paid $75 for those 3 hours.
So with that in mind,
They're called closers.
Yeah, but the closers.
okay, we can talk about this now, since we've already sent the message out to everybody.
Corey?
Motion to adjourn.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. I'll be around next week.
Adios.